to The Hypnotist, the show that gives you inside access to cutting-edge hypnosis with real clients facing genuine issues. Brought to you by the hypnotherapist demanded by celebrities, CEOs, and even royalty, Adam Cox. These recordings took place live from Adam's clinic in London's world-famous Harley Street. So, get yourself comfortable and enjoy today's episode of The Hypnotist.
Hi, it's Adam here, and you're about to listen to a sleep hypnosis session with a twist, because it's not just about getting to sleep. It's about finding a way to train your brain to change how it thinks about anxiety, because anxiety quite often is an anticipatory response to mitigate risk, not about what will happen, but what could happen. And it's a form of your brain trying to keep you safe by thinking of everything that could go wrong and trying to solve that problem before it happens. And there is a plus side to that, in the sense that if you can mitigate risks, if you can prepare or, find some way of making a different choice, then it's actually helpful. But in many cases, the feeling that you get by anticipating the future actually creates a horrible state where it's trying to solve problems that are unsolvable because you're not in that situation yet. So one of the ways of dealing with anxiety is to have the belief system that you can handle whatever life throws at you. A lot of people that feel anxious about one thing don't feel anxious about lots of other things. So if someone is afraid, for example, of embarrassing themselves in public, they might think a lot about social situations, but they might not get worried at all about driving. And I've worked with other people that get really anxious about driving and are completely fine in social situations. So this is designed to help change how you think about anxiety to become more resilient. And resilient is that you've got the resources to either manage or improve or handle whatever the situation is. But it's all linked into this sleep hypnosis session. So if you like the idea of getting to sleep and waking up more resilient with less anxiety tomorrow, you might get some benefit from this session. And if you're curious about working with me directly, have a look in the show notes and you'll see lots of resources and ways to work with me directly. For now, though, find a quiet, comfortable place where you won't be distracted or disturbed. Relax and enjoy the session. Take a deep breath in, and as you breathe in, imagine breathing in a calming, soothing sensation. And as you breathe out, imagine releasing feelings of worry, pessimism, or trepidation. Not all of it all at once, but just small amounts on every outward breath. And if optimism had a color, what would it be? And just imagine breathing in color of optimism. And here's the interesting thing. Optimism is just a general belief that things will be fine. And pessimism is a belief that things won't be fine. But if you were to believe them anyway, isn't it better to be optimistic that things will be fine and deal with things if they're not, than have all of the worries and anxiety and stress of thinking that things won't be fine, and then if they're not and you're wrong, you've experienced all of that stress and worry for nothing. So as you breathe in that optimism, give permission to release the part of you that is trying to keep you safe by being pessimistic. It has a lovely intention to be vigilant, to protect, to manage your expectations and to not let other people down. But as you breathe in the optimism, you realize you can keep yourself safe without needing to prepare or think of the worst. And as you breathe in that optimism, you start to figure out why. What if by being optimistic, you experience less stress, less anxiety, and less worries? Cortisol is the hormone of stress, and adrenaline is the hormone of anxiety, neither of which are good for sleeping. So with that optimism, you have less stress and less anxiety, which means less cortisol and less adrenaline and more of those relaxing hormones like oxytocin and serotonin. And what if, as a result of those, you end up sleeping better? And not just length of time, but quality of sleep. And what if, because you sleep better, you've got more energy, more alertness? What if that keeps you safe much more than worrying ever would? Because worrying is like fighting shadows. You never win that battle. Optimism is assuming things will be fine and allowing yourself to have the resources to deal with real problems, not imaginary ones. So as you breathe in and breathe out, I want you to imagine seeing yourself on a beach in Bermuda. You're not in your own body, but I want you to see a worried, stressed version of you. And perhaps that version of you had a thought, even for just a second. Because of all that worry and stress, they may have said to themselves, I shouldn't be here. It's not right. And yet, that wasn't true. They should be there. And it was right. It was a false alarm. And how many false alarms has to happen before you stop believing the alarms? I want you to rewind that whole Bermuda trip and imagine what you would have looked like being optimistic, calm, and confident. Just because you don't worry doesn't mean you don't care. That version of you could still have called back home and checked. Some people think that worry means love, worry means care. It doesn't. Worry just means stress and anxiety. And I want you to see that version of you that was there in Bermuda without any stress and worries at all. That version of you had permission to just enjoy yourself. And so you do. And I want you to imagine that version of you learns a different belief. You have permission to feel okay, to feel positive, to deal with real problems, not imaginary ones. And when you can imagine that version of you in Bermuda, actually enjoying yourself without worry, let me know by nodding your head. And I want you to see that version of you having a wonderful night's sleep. Perhaps you remember the hotel or the bed you were sleeping in, but instead of restless nights, I want you to imagine deep, high quality, rejuvenating sleep. And then rewind it just before you drifted off to sleep, and then float into that version of you. Feel what it would feel like to be away, enjoying yourself, and having amazing sleep. Perhaps the best night's sleep you've ever had. And I want you to bring forth a voice inside your head. The voice that's been saying, you won't be able to sleep. Things will go wrong. You're going to be tired. You won't be able to do it. But this time, whenever you hear that, just secretly smile to yourself. And each time they tell you that something's going to go wrong, just think to yourself, let's see. And maybe you even say, we'll see, so that all parts of your unconscious get to make the same evaluation. And perhaps you could imagine that the tone of voice of this pessimistic part has the kind of tonality that isn't believable. Maybe every time they say something, it sounds like a question. You're not going to sleep well? You won't be able to do it? You'll spoil everything? It doesn't sound like a premonition. It sounds doubtful. And when you respond with, well, let's see, notice how difficult it is for anxiety to arrive. So as you drift off into a deep sleep, I want you to imagine having a dream about a future. I want you to imagine seeing yourself like you're someone else. Imagine you've got a presentation to a school assembly, and imagine it's the night before. You know what you're going to be talking about, and imagine that that version of you is relaxed, calm, sleeps well, wakes up energized and excited, and see that version of you more resourceful than you normally are, because you have more energy, more clarity, more resources. Imagine yourself presenting to a big group of teenagers and actually enjoying it. Feeling that you get to do that rather than have to do that. And you could imagine that it happens again and again, and each time you enjoy it more and more. And each time you sleep better the night before. Until one day it dawns on you, this doesn't faze you at all. Or maybe you dream about being invited away, social gatherings with friends or family members, where you're sleeping outside of your normal bed. And again, imagine that version of you excited about those invitations. You say yes before any thoughts can pop into your head. If any thoughts pop into your head, make them doubtful and just think, Let's see. You've got a feeling that everything will be fine, and we can call that feeling optimism. Imagine what it would feel like to sleep well in the evenings before you go. And when you go out there, imagine your brain wants to have the best night's sleep ever, just to prove to you that you can. Why doesn't a child look at the monster under its bed that scares them? Because they don't want to see a monster. But every time they don't look, the monster gets bigger. And all they have to do is find the courage to look once. And then they know the monster was never there. And I want you to think that more than 99% of your worries and anxieties are imaginary monsters. And the moment you act like they're not real, they disappear. Fear are like shadows, action and decisions are like light. And every time you decide and act like they're not real, the shadows disappear. And I wonder how many times you have to call the bluff of these shadowy monsters before you come to the conclusion that they're not real. Maybe it's just 3 or 4 times you look under the bed and see there's no monster, to realize there never was. Imagine you're now back in your bed, no longer in Bermuda, head on a pillow. And just imagine that very soon I will count from 1 to 10. And if you're listening to this at a time when you want to awaken with alertness, that when I count from 1 to 10, you will awaken with alertness. But if you happen to be listening to this in bed, head on a pillow, with a desire to sleep well, then when I count from 1 to 10, you will drift off into a wonderful, deep sleep and awaken at exactly the time that is suitable for awakening. And perhaps that's the very next morning. Perhaps just a minute or even seconds before you would normally wake up due to an alarm or something else. Isn't it wonderful how the mind works? Starting to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of The Hypnotist. If you've enjoyed this episode or got some value from it, please give it a 5-star rating and review. And maybe you know someone that would also benefit from this particular episode, in which case share the episode with them so they can also get the benefit too. And if you would like to listen to this episode where it's just the hypnosis, so no intro, no outro, no explanation, just the hypnosis and completely ad-free, there will be a link in the description where you can subscribe at a very low cost and only get access to the hypnosis. So if that's of interest, please check that out. Thank you again for being a regular listener of The Hypnotist, and I'll see you again soon for more.